legislatures are, for the most part, excepting LA, for the most part, they have a sunset. You know, they last 15, 20, maybe 30 years at the max for most of us, and we've got to go back to the voters, show them what we did, see if we can get them to do another one. That's a changing and difficult dynamic if you're happening to if yours is rotating out right about now. I mean, if you think about being in a county that doesn't have one, or if you need to go out with a renewal right now, that's not a good thing. The California Alliance for Jobs in Northern and Central California has played really a lead role in getting $14 billion worth of funding for counties throughout Northern and Central California, and we've really tried to develop that into a pretty honed and somewhat scientific program. We go out and do a lot of polling ahead of time, try to help the local agencies understand not only the mix that should be in the expenditure plan that the voters are going to vote on, but also how to get it to happen. So that's been a major and will be continue to be a huge and important source of funding and advocacy in the transportation community. Then if you go to the state level, I mean, quickly, you know, I look back just in my time, there was Prop 111/108 back in, I think it was 1990, and my memory's getting a little fuzzy, but that had a sales tax increase in it, and it had provision for some future bonding measures. That was a huge victory at the time. You know, it was big at the time, and then we found out over years that the sales tax on gasoline was not getting used for transportation. It was getting co-opted through the legislature because there was needs everywhere, and the sales tax. Many thought the sales tax on gas wasn't like the excise tax, and it should be a general fund thing. So we had to go out there in 2002 and pass Prop 42 because the voters, when they found out that this was happening, they didn't like it, and they wanted to fix the roads, and they figured any tax they pay at the pump ought to go to transportation. We found out that there were later on that there were loopholes in that we're still allowing that money to be diverted. So we had to come back in 2006 with Proposition 1A, which we pretty much brought in from the private sector, really. I mean, from the transportation community, we kind of drafted that, or at least conceptually we did. We sat down with the legislature and got it done and got it on the ballot. And that tightened up the loopholes and put a lot more accountability on the use of sales tax on gas for anything other than transportation. And then as a part of that whole package, Propositions 1B and through 1E, the biggest single bond package in the history of any state, anywhere in the history of the United States was passed. I had the pleasure of chairing that campaign. I have lost a lot of hair because of that. It had its tough moments, but it was at the end of the day, it was a pretty victorious moment. But when you look back now, you know, I thought, geez, you know, on the day after the election, this is good stuff. I mean, look what we've got. And looking back and looking where we are now economically, it was the most fortuitous thing the state could have done. I can point to a lot of contractors and a lot of workers who are only working today because of Proposition 1B and the projects that were made a reality because of it. So that's something that's worth a lot in my book. But it doesn't sustain an economy. And it was never meant to be, it wasn't ever meant or considered to be a permanent solution. It was a temporary solution to try to plug the gap while we look for more permanent ways of securing funding for transportation. Because how many times are we going to have to go out and secure new bond measures from the voters, and how many times will they do it? I think the gate is closing on that. And finally, we've got a measure, well, in 2008 we had a high-speed rail. Again, that was a campaign that I got kind of buffaloed into, but I'm glad I did. We worked hard with very little money, and we got some money for high-speed rail. And then Prop 22 is on the ballot, and we'll all find out in a few days where that fares. Again, if you look at those, about half of them enlarge the piece of pie, and about half of them are trying to protect what was there. So we're in that constant schizophrenic mode of trying to figure out how we do it, how we keep the money together for transportation. The difficulty is that there seems to be a never-ending supply of roadblocks. Every time you figure you have a solution, then something happens to make it not really that great of a solution after all. When you look at protecting state gas tax money, the money we pay at the pump, there's been a unbelievably creative ways of getting around the law to get to that money when the need was desperate enough by the legislature and the governor. I mean, it wasn't just something dreamt up by the legislature. It was basically everyone looking at the problem, saying, where's the money? There's some over there. How can we get it? And that's basically what's driven it. And it's been pretty amazing to me. It's, in my view, has made some of the Enron folks look pretty simplistic, because I don't know how in the world they come up with they've got the Constitution down, and they've read it and reread it, and they know how to get around and do this. So then we come up with different ways of trying to protect it. It's been very difficult, very frustrating, and very counterproductive. It really isn't the way to do anything. And so you're driven to putting measures on the ballot that you really wouldn't do from a policy standpoint, but you do it from a self-protection standpoint. And if everybody does that, which is kind of where we've been the last few years, whether it's education, whether it's transportation, whether it's just name any particular cause that we need in the state, and there's an advocacy group trying to figure out how to save their piece of the pie. Not a good way to do things. We look at Proposition 1B. It's been significant. It's been extremely helpful. It's been somewhat of a bumpy ride as we tried to figure out this was a new way of setting up criteria, and the CTC has had a different role in trying to do that. We've probably done some good things along the way, and some things were less pretty. And we've done what we could in the time that we had, and we put a lot of people to work, and there's a pipeline of projects ready to go. But what's the problem now? Well, we haven't been able to sell any bonds for a while because the state has been in a chronic fiscal problem, and budgets are late. And when that happens, the treasurer can't go out and sell bonds because he's prevented by law from going out and doing it during those times. He only has certain windows that he can do that. So these are the roadblocks that we face, and it's enough to give you ulcers if you don't go home and watch a World Series game once in a while or something, just to get your mind out, go Giants. So where does that leave us? I think that's where we're going now, and I'm gonna sit down. I think what I would say at the end, I may have a few suggestions, but what I would say is that what is the solution? There is no silver bullet in this. There isn't any single measure. There isn't any single approach at this juncture that I can see that's going to get us where we need to go. We're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to structure our advocacy, but we're going to also have to understand that there's a lot of different pieces that we're going to need to put together in order to put together a whole solution that will help us. Thank you.